Hey everybody, how's it going? How are you? I hope you're well. Welcome to D4, D&D Deep Dive. This is the show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons. We theorycraft about them, we crunch numbers, with the intent not to tell you the right way or the best way to play a certain character, but to explore one potential way of playing a character in the hopes of making something that is both really fun to play, but also really powerful. So if you enjoy creating characters for D&D, almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, then welcome home. You belong here, and I'm really glad that you're here, so thanks for being here. My name's Colby. Just as a reminder, if you are interested in getting a step-by-step written cheat sheet guide to this build and all of the builds that I do on this channel, I'd appreciate it if you would consider joining the channel as a member. There should be a little button down there somewhere if you're watching on a desktop or a laptop. For $2 a month, you get access to the library of write-ups that I do that give you that kind of step-by-step cheat sheet guide to recreate the character yourself if you would like. But also, it's just a nice way to support the channel and help me create more and better content. So thank you for considering, and a huge thanks to all of my channel members. You guys are awesome, but even if you're not considering, that's okay. Thanks for being here anyway. I appreciate you watching and liking and subscribing and commenting and all of those things. That's also a great way to support the channel, so thank you. All right. Let's jump in. Many times, if I'm building a character who has access to the Conjure Animals spell, I will get comments in the video asking me why I didn't use it, or telling me how much better my numbers would be if I had used Conjure Animals, etc. Longtime viewers of this channel have heard me complain on multiple occasions about the spell, saying things like, and you'd probably end up doing more damage with this spell than with everything else we've worked so hard to achieve. Stupid spell. And there are actually quite a variety of things about Conjure Animals that make me not a huge fan. And they're actually really similar to a lot of the complaints that I have or had about the Animate Dead spell that I discussed at length in my Necromancer Oathbreaker video from many moons ago. I won't go into them at great length here, but maybe just to summarize, some of the challenges with these kinds of spells that let you summon a lot of minions to help you in combat include the potential they have to really slow down gameplay at your table, the challenge that they often present of spacing in the game and on the battlefield, and how potentially congested the battlefield can be, how difficult it can potentially make it for you and or your allies to do what you want to do on the battlefield. More difficult than that, however, is this. Similar to the Animate Dead spell, I feel like Conjure Animals is just kind of broken in that it has a tendency to either be too strong or largely worthless, with not a lot of opportunity for middle ground, especially as you upcast the spell, right? Bringing 8, 16, 24, up to 32 beasts onto the battlefield just does so much damage and swings the action economy so wildly in your party's favor with one little spell that it will oftentimes, I think, make a DM feel forced to do things to shut down the spell's effectiveness. But I feel like most of those things that the DM might potentially do just shut it down so hard that the spell becomes essentially worthless. If you're always bringing out Conjure Animals every combat, a DM might regularly then start bringing out enemies to each and every fight that have strong area of effect damage options and just wipe out all of your animals in one swoop, right? Or maybe bring enemies that have an armor class that's so high that the conjured animals have a difficult time reliably hitting them. Or have you fight in rooms that are so small that there isn't enough room for all of your conjured animals, etc., etc. Add to those things this little problem. There seems to be a difference in how we're told the spell is supposed to work and how it seems to actually be used at most tables. In the spell description, we're told that you can choose from one of the following options: 1 beast of challenge rating 2 or lower, 2 of challenge rating 1 or lower, 4 of 1/2 or lower, or 8 of 1/4 challenge rating or lower. We're then told by Wizards of the Coast in Sage Advice that the design intent for spells like Conjure Animals is that the spellcaster chooses one of the options, and then the DM decides which creatures appear that fit the chosen option. Later, a spellcaster may certainly express a preference for what creatures show up, but it's up to the DM to determine if they do. In actual practice at the table, however, most DMs seem to simply allow the player to pick both the option and which creatures show up. And honestly, I totally understand why. I do not blame those DMs at all. No, well, or I guess very few anyway, DMs want to force like a lame option on their players who have just spent a very important spell slot, hoping to create a very cool, fun, powerful mechanic on the battlefield. They're wanting a bunch of elk, and instead they get kittens. It might be funny the first time, but it would get old really quickly, I think, for that player, right? So yes, there are a lot of problems with the spell. It's very often either too powerful, in my opinion, or mostly worthless. But part of me has been wondering lately if that's actually true. And I have been promising forever that one day I would, in fact, build a Shepherd Druid who actually uses Conjure Animals to its greatest potential to try and make the best summoner ever. And frankly, part of what really drives me in doing builds for this channel, as many of you know, is just a burning curiosity to figure out if the known most powerful things for D&D 5e are actually the most powerful and how they compare to the other things that we could potentially be doing with our characters if we were to crunch the numbers for all those options, right? So, okay, fine, I'll do a Shepherd Druid. And I actually am very interested and curious and really looked forward to putting this character together, despite pretending to be a grumpy old man about it. So let's figure it out. Is the spell as OP as I like to complain? Are the damage capabilities really off the charts? Now, one little twist I'm going to throw in here. I'm actually going to build this character for burst damage or nova damage, which probably isn't typical, as Conjure Animals is a concentration spell that could potentially do pretty good damage round after round very reliably. I think, however, that because a lot of DMs will try to shut the spell down by killing your conjured animals with a big blast of area of effect damage, and so in that case you really might only get a few of your beasts to survive into that second round of combat, right? So I figure, let's see how much damage we could do in a single turn with this spell if we really tried to build for that purpose. And then, if anything survives after round one, that's just gravy. The spell was really super effective, even if we just got to use it for a single round, assuming the numbers are as good as I think they are. And so I proudly present episode 92. Okay, fine, I'll do a Shepherd Druid. Big thanks to my good friend Randall Hampton, as always, who creates fantastic artwork for the character concepts that I send him each week. I love his talent. I love the attention to detail that he gives to each one of his pieces. If you would be interested in reaching out to Randall to see if you could commission him to create something for your character or party in D&D, or just to follow him and see what else he's up to, I will put links in the video description, as always, on how to find him. So thanks, Randall. Hey guys, before we go on any further, I wanted to really quickly tell you about the sponsor this week, and don't skip ahead because it's really exciting and it's important, I think. And I want everybody to hear about this. So, okay, look, how many times have you been wanting to play Dungeons and Dragons, but you can't find a group? Or you have a group, but you wouldn't really mind getting rid of that murder hobo in your group that's always ruining your awesome RP experiences? Or you could really just use one or two more people to flesh it out, or somebody else to take a turn DMing. Have you ever wished that there were a Tinder for D&D? Well, I am super excited to announce a new app called LFG, Looking for Group, that has a Kickstarter launching in 2 weeks from the time of this recording. LFG is going to work essentially like Tinder, but for people looking for a group to play games with. You'll be able to create a profile for yourself and indicate whether you're looking for players or dungeon masters, or both. Whether you are wanting to play in person or online. If in person, how far are you willing to travel? What days of the week work best for you and what times? How serious are you about role-playing in your games versus a more combat-focused table? What level of adult content are you comfortable with? These and many more things. You would submit your profile, say that you're looking for people to play with, and then the app is going to go out and find people that match your criteria. They'll notify you when you have a match and give you a way to communicate so that you can share information, chat, see if you might be potentially a good fit for each other, and get together and play some D&D, or other games of your choice, of course. We've been talking about and brainstorming about and thinking about this for literally years now, and I'm so excited that it's this close to being ready to launch. So I would really appreciate it if you guys would check out the LFG app Kickstarter page, click the little button so that you can be notified when the Kickstarter officially launches, and spread the word to your friends and family and strangers. And once it does launch, give it your love and support. I think it has a lot of potential to be a really awesome app and help a lot of people be able to play this game that we all love so much that aren't currently able to play because they just can't find people to play with. So good luck, Dallin, Preston. Thanks for giving them a couple minutes of your attention. Let's get back to the build. At level 1, if you can believe it, we're actually going to just go straight Druid on this build. No multiclassing whatsoever. The truth is, nothing, I don't think, is going to bring you as much damage as upcasting Conjure Animals. And so if we were to multiclass on this character, I wouldn't want to do it with anything other than another full caster, so that we don't lose that spell slot progression, right? And at the end of the day, though there are some potentially attractive options in other classes, particularly in Cleric, I think, for me, since they're the other wisdom-based full caster, and that would help keep us from being too mad, too multiple ability score dependent. I don't really think that any of them are worth giving up a level or two to pick up anything to make our burst or nova damage stronger, at least. I think if I were to do any multiclassing with this character, it would probably just be one level of Life Cleric to pick up a really nice bonus to our healing. Going this route would make you a stronger support character, I think, and thus make you a little more well-rounded. It's probably what I would do if I were playing this character in-game, I think. But since we're just trying to maximize Nova damage here, I'm just going to stay the course with a full Druid build and hopefully put a smile on the face of those of you who are always asking me to stop multiclassing so much. As for our race, still not doing custom lineage or variant human, if you can believe it. I would be lying if I didn't say that a big part of the reason I decided to finally do this build was because I wanted to find an awesome way to take advantage of the new kobold from the Mom book, Monsters of the Multiverse. And I would argue the new and improved kobold. Though I appreciate that that is heresy for many of you. That's a whole nother episode. I was not a big fan of Pack Tactics plus Sunlight Sensitivity. It just wasn't reliable enough to me, even though I know that there were workarounds. But anyway, sorry, Pack Tactics. So for those who haven't heard, kobolds have been updated with Monsters of the Multiverse, and the two biggest changes were the removal of Pack Tactics and Sunlight Sensitivity. Grovel, Cower, and Beg has been reworked as Draconic Cry, which tells us that times we can do something really cool. What just happened? Did he just have a stroke? Why is he blowing raspberries? Really quick, funny story. So, a Discord user that goes by the name of Snacks and Naps, who is part of our Tales of Veneria Discord channel. I know many of you want me to create a Discord channel for D4. I think I'll do it one day. But anyway, Snacks and Naps made a comment in Discord a few days ago talking about proficiency bonus times per day, and I've been abbreviating it lately as PBXPD, but he wrote PBTPD, proficiency bonus times per day, and it just looked like somebody blowing a raspberry, like and it made me laugh so hard that I just thought, I'm just going to start using that whenever I talk about this particular mechanic instead of PBXPD. I know that's not as funny to most of you as it is to me, but I think it's hilarious. Anyway, yes, proficiency bonus times per day. With this new kobold, we can, as a bonus action, let out a ferocious yet cute cry that will give advantage on all attacks against creatures that were within 10 feet of you when you cried out until the start of your next turn. And this is for anybody that attacks those creatures, right? I've been wanting to do a build around this little feature ever since it was introduced a few months ago, and today is the day we do so. You also get a new feature called Kobold Legacy that gives you either a skill proficiency, advantage on saves against being frightened, or a sorcerer cantrip. Oh, and very conveniently, you get to choose when you pick that cantrip if the casting stat for it is charisma, wisdom, or intelligence, which I love and is sort of becoming the norm for content that they're releasing now, instead of just forcing you into one specific ability score for the race that you pick, right? It gives you a lot more variety and diversity that you can use when doing character creation. I probably would take that latter option and pick up a sorcerer cantrip, I think. Advantage on fear would be nice, but we will have both a strong wisdom score and wisdom saving throw proficiency, so I feel pretty good about resisting fear already, and druids don't actually have a lot of great choices for damaging cantrips, I don't think. And until we get our better spells going, it would be nice to have a firebolt or a ray of frost handy to use on our turn. You could, of course, pick up the booming blade or green flame blade cantrip, and then like shillelagh a quarterstaff with your druid to make wisdom based weapon attacks, right? And add that little booming blade or green flame blade bonus damage. That would probably be the most damage we could do, like sustainably at early levels at least, without spending spell slots. But I don't have long-term plans to regularly make weapon attacks with this character, especially with their no metal crappy armor class that they have, so I would probably stick with a ranged cantrip personally. As for our ability scores, I'm assuming point buy as always, and recommend taking a 15 in wisdom plus 2, a 15 in constitution plus 1, and a 14 dexterity for initiative, armor class, and saving throw benefits. As for what equipment we ought to start out with, I'd recommend going the gold buy route as usual and picking up some hide armor. And again, I'm assuming that you can't wear any metal. I know some of you can and do at your table, in which case feel free to pick up some scale mail, you heathen. Grab a wooden shield and whatever other necessities you may have. As a druid at level 1, we learn Druidic, which is basically the secret coded language that druids can use to leave messages for each other with twigs and leaves. And then you get spells, of course, and there are lots of great options. Guidance is a great cantrip and kind of a go-to. Ice Knife is probably our best damage spell currently for burst damage, plus it deals a little damage to nearby targets as well. Goodberry, of course, is great utility and potentially really great healing. Healing Word is maybe a must-have. Fairy Fire is probably what I'd be using for my concentration right now to give everyone advantage on attacks against our enemies, especially if we didn't have our Draconic Cry available. That, or actually maybe Entangle, which is very similar to the web spell in its effects, but a bit weaker in that it only affects creatures who are in the area when you cast the spell. Moving them into the area of effect later does not potentially restrain them, it just acts as difficult terrain. And it's a strength save on both the initial check to restrain and when they try to break the restraint on their turn. Still, for a first level spell, it's quite good. And it's not like a high strength saving throw is particularly common for most enemies that you'll be fighting at this level. At level 2, we get Wild Shape. I love Wild Shape. Most druids who aren't moon druids anyway tend to use it primarily for either utility or they'll expend a use of their Wild Shape to do something else that their subclass allows, like evoke their starry form or conjure their wildfire spirit, etc. You could use it to cast the Find Familiar spell, though the familiar only lasts a number of hours equal to half your druid level, so it's only an hour currently. Still, not a bad use of it. It's a great way to scout, get advantage on one attack for you and an ally. If you want to use Wild Shape in combat, just keep in mind that at our current level, we can use it twice per short rest to transform into a beast of 1/4 challenge rating or lower, without a flying or swimming speed, and can stay in this form for a number of hours equal to half your druid level as well. When transformed, you can't cast spells, among other things, though you could concentrate on a spell you had cast before transforming. You could potentially change into a beast that does okay damage. In fact, you could totally just transform into one of the creatures that you'll be conjuring with your Conjure Animals spell when you get it, and that would be kind of awesome just for flavor and fun alone, I think. I'm not going to assume that we're using it in combat, but feel free to do so, of course, if for no other reason than to provide yourself with a little extra survivability, as you gain the hit points of the beast you transform into when you do so, and you don't revert back to your kobold self with your kobold hit points until the beast's hit points that you've transformed into are depleted. We also, of course, at level 2 Druid, get our Druid Circle, our subclass, and yes, we're going Shepherd Druid. And I've actually used Shepherd Druid a couple of times in past videos, most recently in the Swarmkeeper Slingshot. It's always been just kind of for a dip, usually for the Spirit Totem benefits, and not really with the intent to use Conjure Animals. But yes, for someone who is concerned primarily with relying on conjured beasts and fae to do most of their damage in game, it is tough to beat the benefits that you get from Shepherd Druid. I'm curious to know the story of your Shepherd. Not Commander Shepherd, your Druid Shepherd. I should have worn that N7 shirt this week, right? Why do those creatures obey you so gladly? Or is it some form of coercion that you're exerting to control them? Why the strong desire to protect and defend them that you have? Let me know. But as a circle of the Shepherd Druid, we get a couple nice features. First up, Speech of the Woods. You learn the Sylvan language, and beasts can understand your speech. You can also generally understand their noises and motions, though it's not quite like speaking the same language. It doesn't necessarily make them friendly to you either, but you do, of course, have tools like the Animal Friendship spell to help you out with that if need be. A nice little utility feature. But the more powerful feature that we gain at this level, of course, is Spirit Totem. It tells us that once per short rest, as a bonus action, we can summon a spirit within 60 feet of us that gives a beneficial aura to all of our allies that are within 30 feet of it. It lasts for 1 minute, and we can move it again later as a bonus action. The benefits of the aura depend on what form of spirit we decide to summon. The Bear Spirit gives you and your allies temporary hit points equal to 5 plus your Druid level. Not bad at all. You also have advantage on strength checks and saves, particularly good for a friend who's trying to grapple or shove. The Hawk Spirit lets you use your reaction to give advantage to the attack of one creature in the aura's radius, and you and your friends also have advantage on perception checks while in the aura. Finally, we have the Unicorn, which gives advantage on ability checks to detect creatures in the area, and then also additional hit points of healing equal to your Druid level when you cast a spell that heals allies within the aura's area. This is especially potent, I think, if we picked up that one level of Life Cleric like I talked about. Now even the lowly Healing Word, or maybe even Goodberry, will heal for quite a lot of hit points if you pull out the Unicorn Spirit first. Though there is some argument on whether or not each berry would benefit, or maybe the extra healing would just take place right when you cast the Goodberry spell for purposes of the Unicorn Spirit. Anyway, feel free to argue about it in the comments if you'd like. I am just going to assume that we're primarily going to be using the Bear Spirit here to benefit our allies, but also, of course, our conjured friends once we have them. But it's not going to be something that really shows up in the spreadsheet, so just know your options and use the one that will most benefit your party. At level 3, we get second level spells. As always, there's lots of great ones. I tend to think that most of the best Druid spells are their utility and support ones, with some exceptions, of course, but, you know, Pass Without Trace, Healing Spirit, Find Traps. I'm just kidding. Relax. But there are some decent in-combat spell options here as well. Heat Metal is situationally very strong, as is Hold Person, of course, or even Moonbeam or Spike Growth, especially if you build around them, like here or here. The one that I think I would most definitely switch to for my concentration at this point would be Summon Beast, both because it fits so perfectly with the Protector and Summoner of Beasts Shepherd theme that we've got going for this character, but also because it's a pretty strong option for damage, letting you summon a beast that is decently tanky and does pretty okay damage as well for a second level spell. Plus, it gets pack tactics, so at least it can enjoy what we no longer can. Unless, of course, you're just playing with the old version of the Kobold, in which case, you know. The reality is we would only use Summon Beast for a couple of levels until we got Conjure Animals. But I think if nothing else, I would want to use this spell as like a stepping stone story-wise for my character, where I'm summoning and developing a bond with this bestial spirit, and then later, perhaps because of some great loyalty that I've shown them or some work that I'd done to protect their home or otherwise prove myself a friend to nature, they go get the rest of their herd to fight with me as well. At level 4, we get our first ability score increase or feat, and I'm going to recommend taking Shadow Touched here, the darker cousin to Fey Touched that I so often find myself taking. This feat might be an interesting choice story-wise for your character here. You were exposed somehow to the Shadowfell. Did this happen in your character's backstory, and it's only manifesting itself now, or were you perhaps protecting the Feywild or the beasts of the forest from an attack of Shadowfell creatures and were somehow infected by one of them? I don't know, but regardless, mechanically, it's a nice feat for us. First off, it's a half feat. It lets us bump our intelligence, charisma, or wisdom by 1, so we'll take wisdom, naturally giving us a very nice 18 wisdom. Secondly, it lets us learn the invisibility spell, which is situationally very useful, and then one other first level spell of our choice, so long as it's from the illusion or necromancy schools of magic. We can cast both of these spells once per day without spending a spell slot, fantastic, and then can use spell slots to cast them afterwards if we want. As for the spell that I would want to take here, I think I would go with Inflict Wounds, actually. It's a necromancy spell, and for a burst damage spellcaster, it's one of the better single target non-concentration options for damage in game, though it's only available typically to clerics and Oathbreaker paladins. Of course, we could have gotten this spell had we done a 1-level dip in cleric, in which case I'd probably take a different half feat, I think, like telekinetic or fey touched or telepathic, or my favorite, chef, because I really love the idea of making little treats for your conjured animals who happened to survive the battle, making them like little Scooby snacks or something. So cute. But being able to grab Inflict Wounds with this really great half feat will add some nice burst damage if you need to use it to finish off a particularly strong enemy who your conjured animals weren't able to kill, right? In case you didn't know, with Inflict Wounds you make a melee spell attack against one enemy, and if you hit, you deal 3d10 necrotic damage. And the best part is that it scales by an additional d10 for every level you upcast it, which is really quite strong. Keep in mind too that we do get a wild shape improvement here. We can now transform into a challenge rating 1/2 beast, and swimming speed is no longer prohibited in the options that you can choose from, and that should come in handy once in a while. At level 5, we finally get our 3rd level spells, and while Erupting Earth does some pretty nice area damage for this level, Dispel Magic is always useful, Plant Growth and Sleet Storm can bring some nice control options, Revivify feels like a must-have to me, Aura of Vitality can be a particularly nice heal, especially between combat encounters, but the one we're going to talk about, of course, is Conjure Animals. So I talked about it a little bit in the preamble, but just to include some things here that I left out of there. It's an action to cast, requires our concentration, and then yes, you get the choices of, 1 challenge rating 2 beast, 2 challenge rating 1 beasts, 4 challenge rating 1/2, or 8 challenge rating 1/4. And that's the route people typically go, as it tends to provide the most damage and give you the best action economy bang for your buck. And that's the option I'm going to assume that we will be choosing. Amazingly, the spell lasts for an entire hour, so there is a high likelihood that you'll be able to keep these beasts around for multiple combat encounters, assuming they survive, of course. One of the strongest things, though, about this spell is that the beasts you summon obey your verbal command with no action required by you to command them. No bonus action, no nothing. Just tell them what to do and enjoy retaining the benefit of all of your actions, bonus actions, reactions, etc. They take their initiative separate from you and as a group. One last thing about the spell, every 2 levels that you upcast it, it would get an additional 8 challenge rating 1/4 beasts. So there's no benefit to casting it at the 4th level, but it would be 16 beasts at the 5th level, right? 24 at the 7th, and finally 32 as a 9th level spell. Now, I'm going to assume that your DM is doing what most DMs do and just letting you choose the beasts that get conjured. Obviously, if they're not doing that, then the spell is going to be much tempered in power. Hopefully, your DM just doesn't make it borderline worthless if they go this route. But for everyone else, the question is, which beast should we choose? I'm not going to go through each and every option here and give them like a breakdown or anything. There are some fun potential control options like the giant toad, some different things to consider like creature size. Velociraptors are always effective because they're tiny, as proven very effectively by Chris, Treant Monk, and the 30,000 subscriber celebration one-shot that we did with the Dungeon Dudes. Elk and giant poisonous snakes are famous for being the best damage options. Giant owls and giant bats are great if your party needs a free-flying mount, but the one that I think is the strongest for this build, focused on burst damage like we are, and the one that I'm just going to assume that we're always using when I crunch numbers for our damage report, is the Deep Rothe. The what? Right, so for those who don't know, the Rothe is a herd animal that looks sort of like a cross between a yak and a buffalo. The Deep Rothe is simply a smaller variety of Rothe that live in the Underdark. They are a 1/4 challenge rating beast, of course, and they're medium-sized, and thus are just a lot easier to use in combat in most situations than the non-deep Rothe. The shallow Rothe? Rothe. So superficial. Yeah, those are large-sized. The Deep Rothe might not be the best option for sustained damage round after round. If that were our primary concern, I think we'd probably be better off with the elk if we had room for large-sized creatures, or the velociraptor if not, or maybe the poisonous snake if we were confident that our enemies weren't resistant or especially immune to poison damage. But if we're building a character for burst or nova damage with this spell, I think the Deep Rothe is the winner. And here's why. First off, they get the charge feature, which tells us that when they move at least 20 feet in a straight line before they attack, if they land their attack, they get to do an extra 2d6 of damage. While it's true that the elk have a similar feature, not to mention more move speed to potentially pull this off more reliably, they are also large, which means you might have a harder time getting them all to attack a single target, not to mention greater difficulty maneuvering them on the battlefield potentially. But also, they have a lower chance to hit than the Deep Rothe and do a little less damage if they do hit. But wait, you might be saying, they can potentially knock an enemy prone and thus give advantage to the other elk and allies in your party. So they're better. To which I would respond, this is true, but this is why we went kobold. See, with elk, one of the elk would have to both land their charge attack first, without advantage most likely, and with a lower chance to hit, and then the enemy would get to make a strength saving throw versus their fairly low 13 DC, or they won't be knocked prone. Thus, no advantage until one of those elk succeeds on both their charge attack and knocking them prone. But since we're a kobold, we can just run up, roar, and give guaranteed advantage to all of our allies against enemies within 10 feet of us when we cried out, who don't, by the way, even get to make a saving throw to resist this cute little roar. So if we're trying to build a character who is going to do as much damage in a single round of combat as possible, we're going to do a lot better with the higher plus to hit and damage of the Deep Rothe over the elk if we can just guarantee them advantage on a round and pretty much guarantee that they'll be able to get that charge bonus as well during our Nova round, our initial round of combat. Since when we first summon the creatures, we can place them anywhere we want on the battlefield so long as it's within 60 feet of us when we cast the spell. But the thing that makes the Shepherd Druid the absolute best summoner in the game, in my opinion, is the Mighty Summoner feature, which we get at level 6, and which tells us, first of all, that our conjured beasts and fae have 2 extra hit points per hit die they have. Now for the Deep Rothe, that's only 4 extra hit points since they're a 2 hit die creature, but that's like a 30% increase over what they had before, and when coupled with the temporary hit points from our Bear Spirit totem, they would have 28 hit points each now, which means they should be able to take a hit or 2 before vanishing, right? At least at this level. More importantly though, with Mighty Summoner, our conjured creatures' attacks are considered magical for the purpose of overcoming resistance to non-magical attacks. And that really can make all the difference in the world for this spell and others like it, especially as we gain levels and resistance to non-magical damage becomes more and more common. For our first damage report then, at level 6, the tactics are really pretty straightforward. On our turn, we would run up to within 10 feet of an enemy we wanted to target and let out our mighty kobold cry with our bonus action. Then cast Conjure Animals with our action, placing all 8 of our Deep Rothe at least 20 feet away from our target. And then we just run away and hide, probably. When it's our creature's turn, they charge in one by one, attacking for 3d6 plus 4 damage each, enjoying a +6 to hit and making those attacks with advantage. All told, that's going to be 24d6 plus 32. On subsequent rounds, we would have our actions and bonus actions. We could hit an enemy with an upcast inflict wounds if we wanted to pile on some burst damage. I'm not going to be trying to add that into the numbers when I crunch them at all. You could of course just use cantrips for a bit of additional damage, throwing out heals when our friends need them, maybe even taking the help or dodge action if you wanted, while our Rothe do all of the work. One really nice thing here, we should be able to get our Nova round off right away without any setup necessary. And that's always really nice, especially on a burst damage build, since the whole point of building a burst damage build is to take out an enemy as quickly as possible so they don't get a chance to harm our party, and thus we can turn the tide of the battle in our favor right on round 1. And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would, on average, during our Nova round, do 122 damage. And against an enemy with a 15 armor class, we would do 106. And surprise, surprise, that's doing more damage than any other burst damage character that I've built to date at this level, and it's not even close. In case you don't know, check the video description where I compare these builds that I've done to one another and graph them and things like that. The closest Nova damage character at this level, at level 6 here for previous builds, was the Needler, and they were below 100 damage even against a 10 armor class. And what's arguably just as disconcerting, in my opinion, is the fact that unless your Rothe all died to like an enemy fireball or something, you'll likely be able to do close to these levels of damage on subsequent rounds as well, with the key difference of course being that they wouldn't be making attacks with advantage unless you burned another use of your Draconic Cry or somebody had Fairy Fire or something like that, right? So yeah, it's a lot. One thing that I'll mention quickly here: if you're going to use this spell in-game, especially as you gain higher levels, please have a great way to roll for and crunch those numbers as quickly as possible. Set up a macro or get really good at rolling lots of dice quickly and adding up numbers in your head, likely with the help of an online tool to do so, etc. This is really going to make things go more smoothly at your table and to make your friends and DM not have unkind thoughts about how much you're bogging down gameplay. At level 7, we get 4th level spells. There are some fantastic control, utility, and even damage options here, like Blight, or Charm Monster, Freedom of Movement, or Ice Storm, but I wouldn't plan on using my concentration for anything other than Conjure Animals, unless I suppose it was for the potentially even more broken Conjure Woodland Beings. I don't want to get into this too much, but Conjure Woodland Beings lets you summon Fae instead of beasts, and the little trick, of course, is to summon 8 pixies, which are 1/4 challenge rating, and can cast the Polymorph spell, among other things. And then you just have all of your pixies polymorph your enemies into a goldfish or whatever. Oddly, a little bit to me, in my experience, most DMs seem to draw the line at this and don't allow it, though I don't think that there's anything in the game, rules as written, that would prevent this from working, so long as the DM is allowing their player to choose the fake creature that gets conjured. I'm going to assume that you, like most, can't do this at your table, but if you can, congrats on breaking your DM's encounters and making them and probably the rest of your table more annoyed with you than they already were. Go ahead and PYF here, pick your favorites, probably focusing on utility and support options, I would think. At level 8, we get another ability score increase or feat, and I suppose I'd be bumping my wisdom here, even though the damage from our Conjured Animals doesn't actually rely on our wisdom score in any way. It would improve most of our spellcasting otherwise, of course, including the healing that we do. Arguably, you'd be better off picking up Resilient Constitution here to give you proficiency in Constitution saving throws and thus concentration checks. I suppose if I were playing this character in-game, I might have done that as early as level 4, considering how reliant we are on Conjured Animals and how important thus maintaining concentration is for us. It just felt weird being me to not cap the character's primary stat before looking to shore up our defenses. Anyway, we also do get another wild shape improvement here, so we can transform into a beast of challenge rating 1 or lower, and flying speed is no longer prohibited, so that will undoubtedly come in handy once in a while in your campaign, if nothing else so that you can just fly far away from the battle and stay even safer while your Rothe just trample everything in sight. Do I sound annoyed? I don't mean to. At level 9, we would get 5th level spells. And Reincarnate can be a huge lifesaver, pun intended, and hilarious potentially, actually. Gesh is great. Tree Stride Awaken, maybe if you can convince your new tree friend to fight with you and you have the time and money to wake it up. Contagion is potentially powerful. Cone of Cold, Greater Restoration, always useful. Lots of fantastic options, but we, of course, will be using that 5th level spell slot to upcast Conjure Animals so that we get 16 deep Rothe. That's a lot of Rothe. That's a lot of Rothe patties after the fight is over. Here's a question you might have. Could I get 16 medium creatures to make attacks against a single enemy on the same round? It wouldn't necessarily be easy, right? But depending on the layout of the battlefield, yeah, you could, especially if the enemy was larger than medium themselves. But even if they weren't, your Rothe could run up, make their attacks, they'd kind of be surrounding the enemy, right? There's only 8 squares if you're playing on a grid surrounding a medium-sized creature. But assuming the Rothe didn't use all of their move speed to get into attack range, they could move away to make room for the rest. Now, sure, one of them would probably take an opportunity attack and might even die as a result. You're awfully blasé about the death of one of your flock. But the enemy should only have one reaction, so after that one opportunity attack, the rest should be able to move away safely, making room for the rest of the herd. For our damage report at level 9, nothing has really changed for us tactically, aside from perhaps the need to move your Rothe away from the enemy so that the rest can get in and make their charge attacks. But against an enemy with a 10 armor class, at this level, we would do 243 damage on average during that Nova round, and against an enemy with a 16 armor class, it would be 201. And yeah, that's way more damage even than the Critlander. I might be out of cards. Anyway, their damage was only as high as it was if they were fighting against humanoids, so huge asterisk, right? Okay, let's see how far we can push this thing. At level 10, we get the Guardian Spirit feature as a Shepherd Druid, and it's a fantastic way to further bolster the survivability of your conjured animals, telling us that if one of those conjured animals ends their turn within the 30-foot range of your spirit totem, which, remember, can be moved as a bonus action, the creature regains a number of hit points equal to half your druid level, so 5. Not bad at all. That's about 20% of their total hit points currently, if you include the temporary hit points that are bare spirit totems giving them. And every single one of them can benefit from this every single turn. You are a very good shepherd indeed, watching over your flock. Nice work. Except when you let one of them die from an opportunity attack. At level 11, we would get 6th level spells. There are so many amazing 6th level druid spells. Bones of the Earth is so cool and unique and potentially strong for both control and even damage. Druid Grove is fun and flavorful and useful. Heal is one of the best, most efficient healing spells in the game. Hero's Feast is one of the best buffs in the game. Transport via plants, Windwalk, so cool, useful. I'm just actually really glad that Conjure Animals gains no benefit by being upcast at the 6th level, so we can use one of these things somewhat regularly. Unless, of course, we wanted to burn it and just cast Conjure Animals for another combat, which is probably what most of us would do. Stupid. Anyway, pick your favorite. At level 12, we get another ability score increase or feat, and assuming we haven't taken it yet, I think I'd definitely take Resilient Constitution here to benefit our Constitution saving throws and concentration checks. And then at level 13, we would get 7th level spells. Firestorm and Regenerate would probably be the ones I'd look to first, since the other good ones are Concentration, and we, of course, would be using our Concentration and our 7th level spell slot for an upcasting of Conjure Animals so that we could have 24 deep Rothe. Jehoshaphat, trigger, put that pea shooter down. For our damage report at level 13, again, not much has changed tactically. We just have a lot more Rothe and Rothe patties. And so against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would do 365 damage on average during our Nova round, and against an enemy with a 17 armor class, it would be 286. Surprisingly, though they are beating out everyone at the lower enemy armor classes still, the Critlander is now edging them out slightly at the mid and higher enemy armor classes, but again, only against humanoids, which, let's be honest, we're probably not seeing a ton of at level 13, but they do happen. Humanoids happen. Coming down the home stretch then, at level 14, as a Shepherd Druid, we get the Faithful Summons ability. And this is the Shepherd Druid capstone, and it's really among the strongest out there, I think, as far as subclass capstone features go. If you are reduced to 0 hit points or are incapacitated against your will, and this could come from something that would paralyze you, petrify you, or simply stun you, those all create the incapacitated condition, then you immediately gain the benefits of Conjure Animals as if it were cast using a 9th level spell slot. We're level 14. We don't even have 8th level spell slots yet. That's amazing. Now, it takes the challenge rating 2 option for the casting of the spell, but this does mean that we would get 4 challenge rating 2 beasts instantly summoned. So yeah, 4 giant constrictor snakes, or even 4 Allosauruses. Allosauri? Not bad. Now it says, if they receive no commands from you, they protect you from harm and attack your foes. I think most of the time that we're incapacitated, we'll be unable to issue commands to them, but not always. If you're stunned, you can speak falteringly. I'm not sure if that would be enough, up to your DM, I suppose. But I mean, we'd probably just want them to be protecting us and attacking our foes anyway, right? The best part, though, of all of this is that the spell lasts an hour and doesn't require concentration. What? So yeah, you get stunned and you instantly have 4 giant constrictor snakes grappling and restraining your enemies, soaking up damage. Next turn, let's say you make a saving throw and the stunned condition ends. What do? Summon a bazillion deep Rothair velociraptors to help out the 4 constrictor snakes that you've already got controlling the battlefield. Now, I mean, this can only happen once per long rest, but still. From level 14 on, I would almost be begging to get stunned or even paralyzed, I think, unless it were to lead to my death immediately thereafter. This is what a capstone or ultimate subclass ability should feel like. I wish that Wizards of the Coast could do this with all subclasses. It's thematically on point, super powerful. I love it. At level 15, we would get 8th level spells. Lots of fun and powerful ones, of course. Animal Shapes might be my favorite, as it's kind of like a mass polymorph. Feeble Mind is an incredible way to shut down intelligence or charisma-based casters for 30 days. Amazing. Antipathy, Sympathy, Sunburst, all would have their uses and would be really cool to use PYF. At level 16, we get another ability score increase or feat, and okay, if you didn't take Chef before, I'm totally recommending it now, as you have a 17 Constitution, since we took Resilient Constitution previously. You might as well bump it to 18 with this feat and get to make your friend and herd some Scooby snacks. It lets you cook for your allies during a short rest, letting them regain additional hit points, and then, yes, you make treats which your allies can eat to gain some temporary hit points. Those wouldn't stack with the temporary hit points from the Bear Spirit Totem, of course, but they might be handy to have in a pinch. Or like before combat begins, and then you wait to pull out Bear Spirit until the enemy's chipped away at those temporary hit points a little bit. Or give to those who aren't reliably going to be inside the aura of your Bear Spirit Totem, etc., etc. And then finally, for us, at level 17, we get 9th level spells. I mean, 9th level spells. There's only 4 options, but all of them are very potent, naturally. Foresight is incredible for your strongest attack-based party member. Shape Change would probably be the go-to, as it's basically like polymorph on steroids. Want to be a dragon? Here you go. It does require concentration, though. Same with Storm of Vengeance, which feels to me like the ultimate druid spell. It has a range of sight, so just as far as you can see, and an area of a 360-foot radius. Sheesh. And you basically just bring a huge tempestuous storm to bear that does several rounds of damage with acid rain, lightning, hail, wind. I suppose if it were me, I'd probably take True Resurrection just so I could resurrect a fallen companion regardless of how much time has passed. Unless it was over 200 years ago, I guess, for some reason. Or say your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandpappy to find the answer to an important mystery that must be solved in order for you to defeat the final big bad of the campaign. At the end of the day, we, of course, are just going to be using that 9th level spell slot to summon no fewer than 32 Deep Rothae. And yes, for our final damage report then, still not much has changed, just the number of the herd is a big one. You're gonna need a lot of cowboys, or Sherpas, and pooper scoopers. Can we stop with the poop jokes already? And so, against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would on average do 486 damage, and against an enemy with an 18 armor class, it would be 356 damage during our Nova round. Surprisingly, perhaps, there are a few Nova damage characters that we've done for this channel who are edging out the Conjure Animals Shepherd at the middling and higher enemy armor classes. The Critlander versus Humanoids, of course, but also the Evoker Blaster Wizard, though the damage they were doing was spread out among 3 enemies. The Flamethrower Sorcerer is another one, and even my very first Nova damage build, the Assassiner. What a silly name. And yet, I had to work really hard to get those characters to that level of damage. With this, not so much. And so that brings us to our final thoughts. The tier score for this character, when you add up all of the damage that they do at all of the armor classes that we calculate for at each of the damage reports, was 230, beating out everyone but the crit lander when they were making attacks against humanoids. And that is a big, huge asterisk the size of the moon, so practically speaking, the Conjure Animals Shepherd Druid wins. Now, truth be told, I had a lot of fun building this character. I really did. I have fun building all of my characters. But it also pretty much just solidified for me what I already suspected. The Conjure Animals spell is broken. It either does a boatload of damage with little to no effort on the player's part, or it is rendered largely useless by a DM trying to deal with that fact. And as a result, I still don't like it. I suppose the thing that bothers me most about the spell is how effortlessly you just outdamage almost everything else that other players at the table are trying to do. They might have slaved over their character, agonizing over class, race, subclass, feat selection, equipment, spell choices, and with Conjure Animals, all you really need to do is be a druid with spell slots and you can outshine all of them. You could be a druid with an 8 wisdom and a heavy armor master feat that you can't even use because of the metal restriction, and all you gotta do is conjure animals and run away, and there's a really good chance that you'll be outperforming every other player at your table, all while quite possibly slowing down gameplay and clogging up the battlefield so that your other melee allies can't even get within range of the enemies to attack them. Then how come you're okay with the Twilight Cleric, huh? You could make the same argument about them, just from a support or healing perspective, instead of a damage one. That's a good point, Nega Colby. And is arguably true. I suppose I'm more comfortable with support and or healing being imbalanced or OP in D&D because it tends to be a role that relatively few players want to embrace and is often a thankless role to boot. So buffing it to feel super powerful feels a little more acceptable to me, I guess. But I appreciate the critique and that it might feel like a little bit of a double standard. And speaking of criticism of my objection to the spell, I have long said on this channel that the purpose of what I do is not to tell you the right or the best way to play a character, right? And that you don't need to play an optimized character in order to play D&D the right way or anything. If I truly believed that, isn't it a little hypocritical for me to get all high and mighty about how players who optimize their character shouldn't be overshadowed by those who don't? Maybe. I am perfectly open to that criticism as well. Maybe I need to get off my high horse and be a little more willing to allow other players who don't necessarily optimize their characters to enjoy the same or greater power levels as those who do. But I don't know. I tend to be fairly liberal in my politics, but I don't want communism in my D&D. And not only that, but I actually don't think that I'm so much annoyed that someone else might outshine me by abusing Conjure Animals, for example, without any effort. Though, sure, I'm human. There's obviously going to be some of that. But I think it's more that I could outshine myself by doing it, right? I mean, I love thinking about and puzzling together builds to really try to get the most out of them. The puzzling together is half the fun. But then the other half of the fun is seeing all of your careful work and planning really come to fruition on the battlefield in the game. If I can generally outdo all of that by just picking up a single spell, casting it, and hiding, it kind of just takes the wind out of my sails, I guess, for thoughtfully crafting a character otherwise. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, of course, there are things a good DM could do to try and fix what's broken. Some strong AoE options could wipe out a big herd of Rothe. And, as a result, a smart player would probably try to spread out their animals and not bunch them all together, right? And so in that scenario, maybe only half of your conjured animals get taken out, and then suddenly the spell goes from broken to just really, really good. And maybe that's okay. I suppose the easiest thing to do would be for the DM to take a bit more of an active role in deciding what creatures get summoned. Maybe like asking the player for a list of a few that they would like to see, but then ultimately the DM themselves choosing one of them that might not be the strongest option, but it's still good. I can't help but think that that would leave most players feeling a little frustrated, but maybe not. At least maybe not after watching this video, anyway. I would actually love to hear how you would try to fix what I still think is a pretty broken spell in the comments. And also what tools you use to help you keep combat moving smoothly when you do pull out Conjure Animals. But yes, that's our build for the week, so I love you guys. Muy mucho. And I'm really glad that you watched, and thanks for being here and for liking and subscribing. I hope you'll check out the rest of the content in the channel if you're not in the habit of doing so. But more importantly, I hope you have a fantastic day and a great week, and that you stay safe and that you're kind and good, and that I see you again very soon. All right, take care. Bye. Ready, steady, Freddy. Ready? My hair is kind of wet still. Just got out of the shower. Yeah. This is a cool shirt. I got it for Christmas. Toss a coin to your witcher, O Valley of Plenty, O Valley of Plenty, oh. That is a shiny forehead. Toss a coin to your witcher, a friend to humanity. Oh, I'm recording. Dandelion, not Jaskier. Actually, for all of my Polish viewers out there, what's your preference? Okay. Somebody's got a cough. Thus, oh, I already said that. Seriously? Okay. Keep the pits down. How do I sweat that much? It's really not that hot.